This is my Microsoft Ignite t-shirt, and wearing this shirt I would stand on a stage in a large conference room in Florida and speak to thousands of people at one time. Now, speaking to this cold, hard piece of plastic web camera in front of me is very different. And so I just want to reassure you that some people are really comfortable on a stage full of lots of warm bodies, and yet they freeze up a little bit or are scared about having to talk to camera. That's okay. It's a very different skill. So let me give you some of my pointers for how to pull this off. Now, live camera is different to recorded camera. If you're going to be recording something, you can afford to make a few mistakes. But if you're recording it live, then you may have to balance the fact that you might be getting questions in from the audience, and we'll talk a little bit about how to handle that as well. And it's not quite as easy to go back and edit out your mistakes. What is common though is feeling nervous. It's absolutely natural to get those nerves whether or not you're going on stage or whether or not you're talking on camera. The trick is figuring out how those nerves come out. And so on a stage, it may be that your nerves come out pacing or walking back and forwards, or certain mannerisms that you have or things that you say. You might find on camera that your nerves come out in a different way, and the way to pick those up is to practice. As painful as it sounds, record yourself and watch those recordings and see if there's anything repetitive that you do that you might not have done on stage. I've got a tendency to sort of flick my hair a little bit sometimes when I'm on camera, so that's something very cautious that I watch for, that I don't do when I'm on a stage. But like anything, you get better by practicing and critiquing yourself. So, I'm not going to go into depth about different technologies. There are lots of blog posts and videos about setting up cameras or setting up lighting or which microphone to use. I'm going to touch on those things a little bit, but we aren't going to go into too much technical depth with those kind of tools. There are a few simple things that you can do though, regardless of what technology and equipment that you're using. One of them is your background and your lighting. So have a look at what is in the shot that you can see. Please make sure that you haven't written any passwords down, that you've got stuff on post-it notes, that kind of thing. And just be conscious of what is visible that you might have in your surrounding environments if you're not using a green screen or a custom background. It also goes to little things like the placement of stuff in the background. So on an earlier recording, I checked before I did my recording and found that a lamp on the other desk looked like it was sticking into my neck, just the angle that it was on. And it's those little things that if you spend the time doing a little pre-record and checking what the environment looks like behind you when you're talking to camera, it's going to make a big difference. As far as lighting goes, I'm not going to tell you to run out and buy ring lights or stand lights or soft boxes. We are going back to basics. And by the basics, I mean with the lighting you've got, where is it placed? And what reflections do you have bouncing? Right now, I'm sitting in front of a window, so the natural light is coming straight at my face. But before, I also had my office light on, and I noticed that it was casting not only a glare, but a reflection of some of the surfaces too. That was a little bit distracting for my audience. So watch out for those kind of things. If you wear glasses, and here's the thing, I don't normally wear glasses when I'm talking on stage. I put them on if I'm doing a demo and I need to see what's on my computer screen. But I tend to find, because my camera is on my computer and I'm looking at notes, I wear my glasses. Again, watch and see if you've got any reflection on your glasses from lighting. Sometimes it can't be helped. Sometimes you can jiggle things around to make it less obvious. And so I've found optimally, I do this kind of trick where it's a little bit of the tilt of my web camera and it's a little bit of a tilt of the laptop screen that the camera's sitting on top of, and then it's a little bit of a tilt of how I've got my head, and I kind of peer up over the top of my glasses, not that you can notice much, and that just reduces the amount of light glare that's bouncing back off this glass into what my audience can see. Also, where is the microphone that you're using? So if you've got a lapel mic or something like that, that's amazing. If you don't, where are you placing your microphone and your camera and your notes? All of those different things. I have a Blue Yeti that is on a boom arm, a Rode microphone arm, and that is sitting directly on top of my web camera. What that means is that I can talk to you, I can stare down the barrel of the camera, and that's where my voice is going straight into the front of my microphone, and that makes a big difference. When you start your talk, just like as if you're doing one on stage, get people's attention. Now, at the start of the talk, they're hopefully less distracted. They haven't gone and checked their emails or worked in the other applications. And so start off strong. We don't need a long monologue about who you are or what you do. And if you remember, I started this talk painting the picture of me on stage in person with this t-shirt. It's slightly more interesting than telling you what I do for a living and how many talks that I've given. So start strong. Trust that the audience can see your screen if you're doing demos. And there's nothing more frustrating than hearing that presenter go, "Can you see my screen?" or "I hope everybody can see this." Trust that your technology works. Hopefully you've tested it beforehand, but also have a look and see, especially if it's live, if there's any way that you can maybe use two different devices at the same time. We do this when we're using Microsoft Teams for calls because we can join the same team meeting from more than one device. So now I can have a device that's joined, that's taking my camera feed, and I can have another device off to the side that's joined the meeting and is playing what all of the other participants can see. Then, with just a quick glance out of the corner of my eye, I can check that what is being displayed on the screen is the demo I'm showing or is the correct slide that I'm up to. Speaking of those participants, how are you going to handle questions? Clarify that up front with your audience, whether or not you're going to be running some polls, if you're going to throw them some questions and you'd like to answer in the chat, for example. Now, that is going to depend on what platform you're using for delivering your talk, if you're delivering it live. And it's also a good idea to maybe have someone that can moderate the chat. So if there's someone that's looking out for questions that can surface them to you, whether that's through that platform, maybe on a screen, on another device, through another application. If it's a very big meeting, sometimes having that other chat moderator to cut down the noise can be really helpful too. Now, let's talk about gestures and body language. Where are you positioned as far as the camera and your background goes? How do you sit or stand? And that's another good tip. We're used to delivering talks on stage standing up. And when we stand up, it straightens our diaphragm. We get a lot of great airflow through our lungs, and it helps with our energy levels. We're often moving around, or if we're not one to walk up and down the stage, being upright changes the tone and the excitement in our voice. And yet, when we present to a camera, we tend to sit down. And that's perfectly fine as well. But if you find that your delivery is a little flat, that might be the key. So I encourage you, maybe lift up that web camera, lift up your laptop that it's on, and get to a position where you're standing and deliver your talk standing. The thing to watch out with that though is, are you shifting your weight? Remember at the start I talk about how your nerves come out. Sometimes they come out in shifting your weight from one foot to another, trying not to move around too much out of the field of the view of your camera, but those nerves come out because you're just slowly shifting your weight from one foot to another. If you catch yourself doing that, it's really distracting to the audience. It's a hard habit to break, but I know you can if you focus on making sure that you don't do that. Now, the other thing that we do when we're on stage is we gesture, and we encourage speakers to use big movements, especially on bigger stages. When we do that on stage though, we don't necessarily always have to worry where our hands are, and a lot of our movements tend to be down at the waist or the hip level. If we're doing that when we're on camera, it can't be seen, and so we need to be conscious of something that I call being above the fold. Let me take you back when newspapers were a thing and they were big sheets of paper folded in half. And what that meant was when they were folded and stacked at the newsagents, it was only everything above that fold that caught people's attention as they were walking past. So your headline and your premium advertising spots were all above that fold line. Make sure when you're delivering a camera that your hand gestures are also above the fold. So raise your hands like you're in the club and get used to having to do hand movements that are up here. Yes, it feels really weird, but it's a great experience for your audience, and it makes you come across a little bit more animated and interested in what you're trying to say. Eye contact. Where do we look? And of course, we might be trying to look at our notes or our PowerPoint slides. So where are we going to position them? I've got my notes printed out as bullet points right underneath my web camera, and so I can glance at them, but also focus right back down that dark circle of the camera so that I'm making eye contact with my audience, even though my audience isn't making eye contact back with me. Watch your speed and use your pauses. Now, we encourage people on stages to watch that as well, to vary their speed. Speed up when they get excited, slow down when they want a point to hit home. And use those pauses. You know what you're going to say, but your audience doesn't, so they're taking that in as new information and they need a moment to process it. It's extra hard when you don't have an audience to give you that feedback that they're with you and they get it. And so when we talk to camera, it can become a little bit of a monologue that kind of gathers speed like a train, and before we know it, we've taken 10 sentences without a breath. So watch that speed and those pauses. It's another thing to watch. Now, I did say that I wasn't going to talk too much about technology, but you may also be doing a mixture of not just talking to camera. So having planned that out, are you going to be narrating a PowerPoint where your face isn't going to be on camera at all? Are you going to do a mixture where there's some on camera and there's some PowerPoint slides? Are you going to be doing some live demos or pre-recording some demos? And we'll talk about that in a minute too. Regardless of what your mix is of content in your presentation, practice your transitions. So have a go at shifting from your camera to your screen sharing, or from your PowerPoint slide to your demo. On Windows 10, I use multiple desktops for this, and some platforms will handle it. So Camtasia, that I can use to record, will keep recording if I switch to a second Windows desktop in Windows 10. That means I can have my slides on one window and I can have my demo or my browser tabs in another window, and I can flick backwards and forwards between those different desktops using my keyboard without having to shut down my slideshow, end my slideshow, and go back into it all the time. So those multiple desktops are really useful, even when you're on stage as well. Talking about PowerPoint, change those slides often. We don't want to have one slide with War and Peace on it that sits there for the entire 30-minute segment. Slides are cheap. Use as many of them as you can. In fact, I'm very minimalist when it comes to my slides. The least amount of text on a slide is perfect. Use one slide per point and avoid bullet points, but wrap that up with some summaries. If you're going to do a summary slide that recaps a couple of things you've talked about, then that's fine too. But remember, the slides are there to act as a visual anchor to help cement a memory of what you've spoken about. They're not there for your audience to read. When we're talking about demos, tidy up your computer desktop. So hide your taskbar, get rid of your clock. Please get rid of those files that are on there as well. Just make sure that everything is as clean and simple as possible. It's less distracting, it won't age as much, and you're not showing stuff to your audience that inadvertently that they shouldn't be seeing. Just on that too, if you are stepping through an application that has a recently used list, check that. Is there anything in there that would show up that you wouldn't want to make public that you've been working on, for example? Close down all of your applications that you're not using. It's better performance for your system, but it also means that we're not going to get distracted by the fact you've got applications that are open on your taskbar or notifications that are dinging. Use the Windows 10 quiet hours to suppress those notifications with the correct focus mode as well, or just close them down completely. Take the time to tidy up your applications, and it's little things like hiding menus or hiding navigation bars out of the way. It's something I do quite often when I'm demoing the Azure portal. So as I'm going into different blades, the little box that I'm working on gets smaller and smaller because I've opened up all these blade menus. As I go through and demo something, I close them back down to the side to really maximize that real estate for the thing that I'm demoing. And in general, it's a really good idea to run your resolution at 1920 by 1080. Now, if that sounds a little bit weird, it's a really good lowest common denominator. It means that your text is nice and big and it will present well on most screens. We get so used to working on a high resolution device that makes everything tiny because we've got a really big screen that we're watching it on. So set your resolution at 1920 by 1080 and then it will just make everything a lot more visible to the people that are looking at it on screen. Those are my best tips so far to get you started for being confident delivering talks to a cold, hard plastic web camera. And I'm just going to leave by saying, hang around at the end of your event. One of the things that people miss the most with these online events is the chance to come down to the front of the stage and ask the speaker their questions. And so unless you are in an online event schedule where there are sessions straight after you, and even still most of those have a gap, make sure that you don't block yourself into something of needing to disappear as soon as you finish that talk. Tell the audience that you will be around for as long as they're happy to stay around and chat and answer the last of those questions, or at least make sure you leave your contact details so they can get in touch with you if they've got a follow-up question. My name is Sonia Cuff. I'm a cloud advocate from Microsoft, and I hope you liked those tips. You can follow me on Twitter at soniacuff.com.